Thank you. I'm Charlton Jackson. I'm the middle school principal here at CI, and it is a real honor to be here and to talk about beating the odds. So I want to start with there's a sticker on my computer, and the sticker says, "I am my ancestors' wildest dreams," and just by virtue of me being here today, that is beating the odds, and I'll share with you what I mean by that. My great-great-great-grandparents were slaves in the United States. If you or anyone had asked them or told them that one day your great-great-great-grandson will be here today, in this capacity, it would have blown their mind. The same holds true for my grandparents. My grandparents grew up in the deep south of the United States, in Louisiana and Mississippi. And during the Jim Crow laws, during the Great Depression, if you had asked them the same thing, it would have blown their mind. But to be honest, I feel like the journey that brought me here and me standing here today, my part of it was only the tip of the iceberg. All I did was cross the finish line, and I'm, as they say, feel like I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. So I want to tell you my story. I'm going to go back a little bit. I'm not going to go far back as great-great-grandparents, but I will start with my parents. I'll start with my dad. So my father was born in Mississippi. Mississippi is one of the poorest states in the United States. He grew up there until about third grade with three siblings and a single mom, my grandmother, Grandma Lee. From there, they moved north to Chicago. That is a typical migration for a black community to go from the south to the north. They lived with relatives, very, very poor, and eventually they moved out west to Compton, California. Now, along the way, my father had his share of challenges. The first one began with him in the third grade. As I said, Mississippi was a very poor state, and the education system there, at least where he was, wasn't strong. He was a little behind in the fundamental skills, so he moved up to Chicago and had to repeat the third grade. So at that point, it wasn't looking well. But he had something very fortunate happen to him. He had a cousin Leon. These are the stories that he's told me, and I'm going to share with you. He had a cousin Leon who happened to excel in school, and my father actually used him as an example. Not only as an example, but he also served to support my father in ways, in school and help him a little bit in the beginning. And out of that, my father discovered a love of learning. He figured out that, even though we're very poor, even though we don't have a lot, even though we have multiple families living in a two-bedroom home, he felt like for him, the way to success was through education. So he did that. He put his energies into school. That carried on even when they moved out to Compton, California, into high school. And then when he graduated from high school, he actually got a good job. He got a job working at the post office, a government job. So everyone around him, all of his family was like, "Wow, we're so proud of you. You have a good job now. You don't have to worry anymore." But that wasn't what he had dreamed about his entire life. He was into education, so he didn't settle for that good job. He worked it part-time, but at the same time, he wanted to go to college. No one else in his family had ever gone to college. So he worked at the post office part-time, and then the other part-time, he went to Compton Community College. Unfortunately, you have to pay tuition, so he was using the post office job to do that, but he had to drop out a semester, work full-time to get the money to pay for the tuition. And at that time, there was the Vietnam War going on, and there was a draft. But they would only draft individuals who were not enrolled in college, assuming you were of drafting age. Well, the moment he dropped out to earn money for the next semester, he got drafted. But there's a saying that says, the harder you work, the luckier you get. And he was actually lucky because of the hard work that he had put in, because he applied himself in school, not only in math and science, but in anything they had to offer. He actually learned to type while he was in high school. So when he did get drafted to the Vietnam War, he did not have to go fight on the front lines. He was lucky. He was able to get a clerical job behind a desk. So he did that. He served his tour. He left the military after the time he had to serve, and then continued on, ultimately finished up at Cal Poly Pomona, became an electrical engineer, and went on to work for Southern California Edison as an electrical engineer. But the luck went beyond that, because there was something called a GI Bill. Whereas if you were a veteran, if you served in the Army, you could, through the GI Bill, you can get low interest loans. He was able to buy a house with him and my mother. And Compton was in a situation where actually there were a lot of houses up for sale. So he was able to buy multiple houses in Compton, where he kind of used that to supplement income. So that was kind of his story. But the main theme of his story was he stuck to his beliefs in education. So now let's move over to my mother. My mother also grew up in the South, or was born in Louisiana. She, different from my father, her mother and father were together, and she had 5 siblings. And when she was 6 years old, they moved out to Compton, California. And the biggest challenge for her was that her mother, my grandmother Edith, she was only 16 when my mother was born. My mother was the oldest of those 6 kids, just as my dad was the oldest of the 4 kids. But being the oldest, when your mother's 16 years older, meant she had to play a role, almost a second motherly role, to help raise the kids. She also felt a certain need to be an example for her siblings. And similar to my father, somehow she got it in her head that I'm going to do this through education. I'm going to be a role model for my siblings. I'm going to be able to help support the family. I'm going to go to school. So she, similar to my dad, she went to Compton Community College, then went on to Cal State LA, and became a social worker. She also was a lifelong learner, because after that, she later went back to school, became a registered nurse, went on to become a public health nurse. So that was the lesson that she always said, is that you can do whatever you want to do, and education is the means to do it. So when you stop and reflect and think about those 2 stories that kind of leads to my journey through Chadwick, there's something in common. The common theme is they had a certain belief that they stuck to. And then when my mom, after having graduated, she had a friend named Barbara, who had a child that was my age. And Barbara told my mother, there's this great school. There's a school, it's one of the top schools in Southern California. It's the best school in the South Bay. I'm going to send my daughter there. And my mother, not to be outdone, says, oh yeah, what's the name of this school? Chadwick School. Oh, okay. I'm going to send my son there. So that's where I come into the story. Like my mother, like my father, I was the oldest. I was only the oldest of 2. But if you stop and think about the situation here, what you have is you have a black family, both of which, my mother and my father, were the first to get college degrees in their family in a time when no one else was even talking about that. I was obviously the first child of this couple. So when I entered the scene at Chadwick in 1975, I was very, very, very fortunate. In 1975, only 10 years earlier, blacks weren't even allowed to live in Palos Verdes, which is where Chadwick is. And now here's another interesting fact. In 1975, there was a class, my kindergarten class of 40 kids, 10 kids were black. That's an incredible number, 25%, when, just 10 years earlier, there weren't even blacks in the city. Now, the unfortunate part, though, is 13 years later, I graduated from Chadwick, and in that class of 64, 4 kids were black. And of the original 10, there was 2 of us remained who were Wiles, me and a friend of mine, Patrick Purefoy. Patrick ended up going on to Princeton to become an attorney, and I ended up going on to Dartmouth and studying engineering like my father. So that's kind of the beginnings of how Chadwick entered the scene. So as I said earlier, my role in this family journey of beating the odds was just crossing the finish line. But the common theme is belief, so I want to share with you a few stories about Chadwick that shaped what I actually believe. The first story happened when I was in 2nd grade at Chadwick School. In 2nd grade, we had this coach, Coach James. Really charismatic, positive, joyful coach. Everybody loved him. We all loved him. And we happened to be in PE class that day. And in PE class, we were playing kickball. So, I think, it just may have been a good day that day, but, he would ask us, how do you want the ball? Do you want it fast and on the ground, or do you want it slow and bouncy? I was like, slow and bouncy, sir. So he pitched me the ball. Boom, home run. I was like, oh, that was pretty fun. I was really excited by that. Second time up, same thing happened. Home run. By the third time, with the third result, Coach James looked at me and said, I'm going to call you Big Bopper. All the kids laughed, and it was fun, and I kind of enjoyed that name. But I ended up being the Big Bopper for the rest of that year. By the time I got into middle school, it had been shortened to Bopper. By the time I went through high school, upper school, it became Bop. But as I talked about the importance of belief, what happened in that story was I actually believed and wanted to be Bop. And Bop represented who I was. Bop was the athlete. That's what I believed I was. I believed that I was the athlete of the class, and I believed that I had to live up to that. Now, the interesting part about that is I also think that many of my classmates thought that it was a natural thing. That sometimes that could be a stereotype, where people see black students, they think, oh, they're good athletes, so, that could be thought they're just born that way. But what people didn't really know was because I wanted to be Bob, because I believed that I was Bob, I worked really, really hard to be Bob. That was my thing. After school, in the summertime, I was always playing football and basketball, and kickball was just the start of it, but I was and wanted to be that athlete. It got to the point where even in high school, I would get up at 4 a.m. and get up to Chadwick by 5:30 so that I can work out before school. I wanted to be Bob. And it was through hard work, though. It wasn't just through being born that way. So that was the first story. The second story that shaped who I believed I was and then who I tried to become, this story happened around in early high school on the basketball team. We had a coach, Tom Meyer. He had a really strong basketball program. We had won the state title a couple years. Every year we were winning the prep league. The prep league is a little bit like our kayak league. It's a league of schools very similar to ourselves, college preparatory schools. But his philosophy was he wanted us to play the biggest public schools, the toughest inner city schools. And he felt like if we did that, that would prepare us for our prep league, and then we'd go on to have success on our level. So we were playing one year in the Watts Summer Games, right? And if you don't know Los Angeles, the way it works is you have like South Central might be here, over here you have Watts, and right here you have Compton. They're pretty much close to each other, and all of those areas are considered like the inner city, the hood, the ghetto, so to speak. So we were in the Watts Summer Games, and Coach Meyer knew that I lived in Compton. The way it worked back then is there would be a van, and the coach would drive the van, and all the players would be in the back. We didn't have like buses, so we were all together, and we were driving from Watts through Compton, getting back to the freeway. And Coach Meyer looked to me and said, "Bob, I can drop you off at home. That way you don't have to go all the way up the Palos Verdes just to come all the way back." And for some students, that could have been a challenging situation, right? Because remember, it goes back to what you believe. For some students, that could have been a very challenging situation where all your friends and teammates, my Chadwick friends are there. You're driving down the street, you see graffiti on the walls, you see unsavory characters standing on the corner, and as you drive through that neighborhood, you're dropping off one of your teammates. Very different from where Chadwick is. But I didn't see it that way. I didn't believe that to be a negative. For me, I actually saw it as a badge of honor. Yeah, I don't know why. It was kind of weird. I saw it as like when we would go play those big public schools, and I saw it as, hey guys, don't worry, we can compete with them. I'm like them. I'm one of them, but I'm on your team. That was my weird way of looking at it. So I was like, yeah, sure, coach. Coach dropped me off. I went along my happy-go-lucky way, went into the house, and then they drove off. So for me, Bop started off as the athlete, but then it became a weird sense of pride about being, no, I'm that kid. I'm that tough kid from the hood. The truth is, I was not the tough kid from the hood, as I told you, right? I was a Chadwick kid. My parents, we owned our house. My parents, we rented out other houses. Most of my friends lived in the houses that we rented out. I had a rule that my parents had given me that you got to make sure you got to be in the house by the time the street lights come on. So I was never out running the streets at night. My experience was Chadwick. But I wanted to be Bob, so I played that role. I was the athlete. I was the tough kid from the hood. But there was a problem with that. The problem with that was that's not really valued so much at Chadwick. It's very similar to here. You don't really get a lot of social capital out of being either the best athlete or the tough kid. Where at Chadwick, you get more social capital out of being the smart kid, the academic kid, the kid who does well in the classroom. So for me, there was still something lacking, which leads me to my third and final story. My third story happened at the start of ninth grade. This was a ninth grade science class. We had a new science teacher. Her name was Miss Wiernig. And Miss Wiernig didn't really know me as Bob, right? That reputation, she knew nothing about it. Everybody was new to her. And to be honest, I wasn't a bad student. I just didn't really apply myself. Like, I got B's and C's, but for me, like I said, I was trying to be that athlete. So that was what was important to me up until that first week of ninth grade. So in Miss Wiernig's ninth grade science class, we had an early test. It probably wasn't even a unit test, probably was more like a diagnostic test. I don't really remember. But what I do remember is, and maybe it was the moon, the stars, the sun, everything lined up perfectly. I happened to get the highest grade in the class on that particular test. I can't even explain why. And as Miss Wiernig was passing back the test, she came up to me and handed me my test and said, "Oh, you must be the smart one." And then kind of everybody looked at me, and I looked at them because, everybody else, I'm Bob. That's the athlete. But I liked how it made me feel. But then it became a little bit scary because then I started to think, what's going to happen the next time we have a test? Is she still going to think I'm the smart one? So that day, something changed inside of me. What changed inside of me was I wanted now not only to be Bob, the athlete, but I wanted to be Charlton, the student athlete. So I studied really, really hard for my next science test. That year was the beginning, and every subsequent science test after that for the rest of that year. And the funny part about it, I still had to carry that persona as the tough hood kid too. So I really didn't tell my friends that at home I was going home and staying up late and studying and doing the things that they didn't know me to do. But I will say what ended up happening was, I continued to get A's in that science class. Pretty soon, my classmates started to see me as, he's not just Bob, the athlete. He's a student athlete. He's good at science. That kind of then started to spread into some of the other subjects, and who I thought I was changed. So who I believed I was changed. And because I believed now that I was that student athlete, I started to work towards it. Because again, there is often a misconception about students that, you're smart, gifted, and you're born that way. But that's not the truth. That is not the truth. So when I think back to all of those stories, when I think back to the stories I just told you about me, when I think back to the stories I told you about my father and my mother, in terms of beating the odds, there's certainly a common theme. Yeah, as I said, and as I think it was Henry Ford who said, whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right. And that's about belief. So when it comes to beating the odds, you have to believe that everything is figure-outable. You can figure out anything as long as you believe in the right approach to it. And what is the right approach? The right approach has nothing to do with being born smart or being born a gifted athlete. It has everything to do with how you choose to work towards that. So then now that brings me here today, here at CI, reflecting on my goals in life, what I contribute to the world, and what has led me to believe is that the way I can impact the world, the way that we here at CI can impact the world is if we can get every student that comes through these gates to believe, because there's power in belief, to believe that everything is figure-outable if you have the growth mindset. You don't have to worry about being born smart or being born gifted. That doesn't matter. What matters is, do you have the courage to try your hardest and have setbacks and not succeed the first time and continue to do it again and to persevere with that? We call that a growth mindset. If we can get everyone that comes to these gates to believe that, then we've won. And everyone will come to understand that anyone can beat the odds. That's my story. Thank you. Kamsahamnida.